sliding into the weekend, sliding into a new video. Long-time viewers will know that one of my viewers, Barry, was and has been stood accused to be lurking in my back garden during my live the other week. Now, as you may have seen on my Twitter, I left my sliders, my Adidas sliders, outside in the garden overnight the other day. One of them got lost. I later found it about genuinely like a day later at the bottom of the garden, and it had a massive bite mark in it. So, backseat Barry, what do you say about that, my friend? Well, anyway, we're not here to talk about sliders. We're back with another video. Today's video is all about the man, the myth, the future legend perhaps, Richard Hughes, who has been described to me as cold as ice. He always gets what he wants. Now, you may have seen I did an article on this very topic a few days ago. If you've not read that, go and have a read, or just watch this video and we'll go into more depth in a slightly more relaxed style about Richard Hughes, because in a few days' time he will officially have been at Liverpool for a year. Now, officially is the key word there, because he was handed the keys realistically late February, early March 2024 as Liverpool's sporting director, the man who holds the keys to the day-to-day operation at Anfield. So I thought it's the right time to do a video on him. If this YouTube channel existed in, I don't know, January, for example, I may have done a video defending him, because from what I heard from people, everyone had good things to say. Some people had maybe little digs at him, but when you actually say them out loud, they are actually compliments, even if they were coming from agents who were a little bit annoyed with Richard Hughes. So he's been here a year, so we're going to just run through things about Richard Hughes, because I don't think many people actually know that much about him. They obviously can see him in his lovely comb over with a bit of grey in it now, and he looks like a man that can command a room, doesn't he? He looks like, you know, if you sat across the negotiating table from him, he looks like a man who gets what he wants. He's got quite an aura to him, I feel. But we're just going to just run through Richard Hughes' career, starting way back from when he was a player at Portsmouth. Now, I've seen some pictures going around this week of him playing for Portsmouth. Proper Barclaysman sort of era. Midfield. I do sort of remember him in like, this would have been about the era that I just started getting into watching football. I would have been about 7 or 8 at the time. I remember him in the sticker books and the shootouts and all that sort of stuff. Don't remember. I'd love to fire up the PS2, get him on an old FIFA. I'm dying here, aren't I? Apologies. But he's had a brilliant career basically after his playing days. He had a pleasing career in his playing days, but the one sort of anecdote that you want to know about from his playing days was when he was at Portsmouth under Harry Redknapp, who I spoke to for this piece, and they formed what we can call maybe an analyst's room, I think they called it at the time, and the people in it who were playing for Pompey in the day, sort of Harry Redknapp described them to me as you know, laptop geeks and laptop nerds. But these were players at the time. There was Hughes, there was Eddie Howe, there was Gary O'Neill, who obviously was at Wolves and Bournemouth before that. Or was it the other way around? No, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. There was Michael Edwards, who wasn't a player, but he was a sort of technical analyst. Don't know why I'm doing all this today. Michael Edwards was a technical analyst. Hughes and Edwards struck off a relationship then, or hit it off. Well, they didn't hit it off, but you know what I mean, they made friends. Eddie Howe obviously was good friends with them both. Them lot have all sort of remained friends. I mean, going back even further, Richard Hughes was playing in Italy. He was in the Atalanta youth system, which is why he speaks Italian. He did a bit of Italian TV after his playing career. I know we're sort of skipping around the timeline here, but basically that whole Italy adventure, I think his dad was working in Italy at the time, that's why he was out there. it means that he's just multilingual, he's comfortable in all sorts of European cultures, which is why when he goes and gets these players, it's just, just easy for him. He speaks multiple languages. And what Harry Redknapp described him to me as was a walking, talking contacts book. Basically, if you say I'm a manager, I say, all right, Richard, mate, how's it going? And he's like, all right, Lewis, yeah, good, are you? And I'm like, what do you think of this player in France? Well, according to Harry Redknapp, he knows absolutely everything about everyone around Europe. Maybe not everyone, didn't know much about me, for example, but footballers, top-level footballers. And Harry Redknapp said, if you ask him what he thinks on a player, he'll be able to say what he had for dinner last night. So, yeah, he's got real good references from around the football community. Just looking at my notes here, because contrary to opinion, I don't just remember everything in my head. I do remember most things though, of course. But basically, another former colleague of his said to me, if he wants to sign your player, he won't go as far as sending them a bouquet of flowers, but he will do just about everything else to wow them, and it normally works. No, all I'm thinking there is, why wouldn't he send them a bouquet of flowers? You can get them for a £5 from your local Tesco. Richard, come on, step it up some. But yeah, fast forwarding slightly in that timeline, Eddie Howe takes him to Bournemouth. Bournemouth, obviously, brilliant story over the last 10-15 years. League 2, established Premier League club, doing very well under Andoni Iraola now. Got designs on getting into Europe, very nearly did last season. Obviously, they've lost Kirkes, Huijsen. I don't know if the Zabani one's gone through yet, but Kepa's gone as well. So anyway, this is not a Bournemouth video. It's not a Bournemouth channel. But yeah, great club. And that is just a mad tangent that I didn't need to go on. But basically, eventually Richard Hughes becomes the transfer chief at Bournemouth, and Michael Edwards by this point is working at Liverpool. Obviously the two are mates, and they would often, Edwards would ring Hughes and say, basically use him as a bit of a sounding board, like, oh, have you had any good references about this player? What do you think about this player? Do you have any contacts around this player? Thinking back to that walking, talking contacts book that I mentioned earlier. But basically, Edwards and Hughes cross paths loads of times in a recruitment sense. At the last part of a deal, it would be between Liverpool and Bournemouth for players. And, with all due respect to Bournemouth, that shouldn't be happening. But Richard Hughes would put Bournemouth in conversations for players that maybe they shouldn't by right be going for. I mean, the two that I'll mention now, Harvey Elliott, Andy Robertson, maybe that's different because they were young. Robert was unproven at Hull City, only about 8 million. Wouldn't have been too out of this world for him to sign for Bournemouth at that time. But Edwards was thinking, hang on a minute, why is this fella, Richard Hughes, just keep annoying me at the last minute? Now, obviously, Liverpool had the spending power, they had the finances, and obviously, if someone says to you, do you want to sign for Bournemouth or Liverpool, most players would say Liverpool. Although, not all of them, clearly, because Richard Hughes did beat Edwards to some players. Lloyd Kelly was one, I think, at Bournemouth. David Brooks was one who Liverpool liked them both. They very nearly pulled off a massive one, which was Sadio Mane when he was at Southampton. Mane, obviously, as we know, went to Liverpool, did brilliant at Liverpool, but Bournemouth were very close to getting him, and that was Richard Hughes. It's all this time, Michael Edwards is thinking, this guy, yeah, he knows what he's doing. I mean, Mane was different because he had a real good, he was good at Southampton, he scored goals. I remember him scoring a hat-trick. I remember him in my fantasy team at the time at Southampton, so he must have been good. So that one's a bit different, but some of the players, David Brooks, Lloyd Kelly, slightly unproven. I think Kelly, was he at Bristol City? Brooks, would he have been at, where would he have been? I don't know. Where was Brooks? Anyway, doesn't matter. I know he started his career at City, didn't make it there. But yeah, Edwards was just thinking, hang on a minute, why is this guy always in the market for these players? He must know what he's doing. Maybe a bit of arrogance on Edwards' part, that sort of thing, thinking, well, I know that these are amazing players, so he must have his head screwed on if he knows they are as well. But, you know, Edwards, fast forward maybe 5 years, Edwards was very surprised, and I know this because I've had people eavesdropping in conversations that Edwards has had. Edwards was very surprised that Hughes was still at Bournemouth around this time last year. I think that he was thinking, why has he not been snapped up by one of the, you know, proper heavyweights of European football? And that was why he was the number one candidate for Liverpool when it became clear that they were going to restructure their football operations, when it became clear that they needed a new sporting director after George Schmadtke left the club. There was a few names floated at the time. I think the West Ham guy, Tim Steitlen, there was probably something in that. But as soon, I think it was maybe even late January, it became clear that Hughes was going to be the man. I know a guy who knows a guy who texted Richard Hughes at the time, and he said, nothing in this Liverpool link, I'm going to Italy. So I don't know what happened there. But anyway, it soon became clear that Hughes was coming to Liverpool, and a year on, what a job he's done, let's be honest. I know you guys have maybe not hated on him, but like criticised him, and I think this time last year, that was fair. We're not going to rewrite history and suddenly say, oh, he's done a mastermind last summer as well by not signing anyone, because obviously, well, it doesn't really matter. Liverpool won the league. And I think that was what Slot wanted to do. He kept saying, let's not sign players for the sake of it. But you guys criticised him, I think at the time. Maybe that was fair. But I think just going back slightly before that, before the summer transfer window, Hughes pulled off what I think is his best piece of business so far, and that is recruiting Arne Slot. Because really, in March 2024-ish, February, March, April time, how many of you guys was saying, I want Arne Slot? If you're sat at home now saying that you did, then you are lying, because no one was talking about him. Everyone was talking about Xabi Alonso, Ruben Amorim, who else was in the picture? Roberto De Zerbi. I mean, yeah, apart from the first two, I think everyone had faults. Ruben Amorim is obviously tanked at United, but with hindsight, looking back a year ago, I think that he was a good manager. I think he still is a good manager, but he's at a cursed club who are a disgrace of a club. But anyway, let's carry on. No one was really looking at Arne Slot, but Richard Hughes was. Will Spearman, Liverpool's data expert, was. He ticked so many boxes. There was about 25 data metrics that Liverpool looked at. Slot came out on top in not all of them, but a lot of them, and certainly more than anyone else. Ruben Amorim came out on top in quite a lot of them as well. Xabi Alonso, by this point, it was clear that he was not going to be joining Liverpool. He wanted to do one more year at Leverkusen, and reading between the lines, he'd been texting Florentino Perez, and it was already done back then for him to go to Real, because it was clear that Carlo Ancelotti was leaving. But Slot was top of the pile for Liverpool, and this is really important for how Hughes managed to get Slot to the club, because it wasn't easy. The year, I think it was 1 year earlier, Daniel Levy flew out to Holland and basically said to Arne Slot, you're in our top three for this job, mate. You're brilliant. And Slot was like, what are you on about, Daniel? I want to be your first choice. It's like, you know, I'm not going to do an analogy of like pulling someone, but if you told a girl that she was one of your top three contenders to take out on a date, she'd want to be number one. That's what I'm saying. And Slot was told there and then that he was Liverpool's number one priority, and he loved it. His agent, Rafaela, loved it. And that was how he was tempted to join Liverpool, because a lot of clubs had tried and a lot of clubs had failed. Leeds had a go before Spurs. I think Todd Bowley had a go at Chelsea as well. None of them could tempt Slot to join. He loved Feyenoord. He'd fallen in love with the club. He'd fallen in love with Rotterdam. He didn't want, you know, his family were, his younger kids were doing exams. They still are, I think, or they may have just finished. He didn't want to leave for the sake of it. But Liverpool came calling, and that was something that made him want to leave. Main reason, was Richard Hughes. He flew to his house in Zwolle with a massive ring binder. I think someone told me it was 60 pages, may even be more. But I just like to imagine the scene, you know, him walking in with a massive folder under his arm like them ones used to have at school or uni. And he basically plonks it on the table and says, this is everything that I know about you. This is how you fit our style. This is how you fit our squad. This is why your man management style is brilliant. This is why your tactics are brilliant. We've looked at I've watched, you know, Richard Hughes says this, I've watched your game from 2 years ago, for example. I really liked how you changed the pressing structure at half time. That's just a level of detail that not many people would have gone. You know, he said, I watched the press conference that you did 4 or 5 weeks ago. I really liked the message that you sent out to the fans and the team. That's something that we can get behind. He really liked the the squad availability, the lack of injuries. Obviously that's mainly led by Ruben Peters, who's now at Liverpool. He liked his relationship with Sipke Hulshoff, how they sort of work together in tandem. It's like every one of Slot's coaches are an extension of Arne Slot, but they're not afraid to call them out. So they're all very close, but it's not like, oh, well, if the boss says that, we won't put our input. Slot trusts everyone. Anyway, tangent in here about Slot. This is about Hughes. Hughes wowed him. A couple of weeks or months before, Julian Ward went over to Feyenoord, officially to sniff around whether loans would be a good move to Feyenoord, but really he was getting first-hand references on Arne Slot. So that's how Richard Hughes won over Arne Slot. And I think that's a really interesting insight, especially in terms of this summer and next summer and, you know, all the time that Richard Hughes is at Liverpool. That's how he gets players. And Florian Wirtz, you know, that was not easy to do. That's a really, really hard deal to do, especially when it would have been very easy for Florian to just say, sorry Richard, I don't feel comfortable, I want to go buying. Or, you know, sorry Richard, I've idolised Pep Guardiola, I want to go to City. Richard Hughes tempted Florian Wirtz to join, and that's a massive statement in itself. One of the best players in the world, one of the best youth players in the world, and Richard Hughes managed to tempt him to Liverpool, as he managed to tempt Frimpong and Kerkez. Again, not as high profile as Wirtz, but still very good deals, decent prices. 70 million for 2 fullbacks. In this day and age, that's very good. There was a succession planning with Georgi Mamadashvili. There was obviously Chiesa, hasn't worked out, but at 10 million, you know, in another life, in another world, Chiesa may have come off the bench, scored 5, 6, 7 goals last season. He would have already repaid that fee. It was a risk worth taking. At 10 million, rising to about 12.5 with add-ons, which have probably been triggered by now, to be honest. But again, it was frustrating last summer, but it's all working out now. Richard Hughes, as well, got Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah done, which was, again, not easy, because you put yourself in his shoes. He's walking into a club where his best 3 or 3 of his best 4 or 5 players are out of contract. That's a terrible situation to inherit. And it was not easy, and he got a lot of stick, especially when we got into 2025. We got into January, February, March, still hadn't been done, but he got it done. And worth noting as well, all of the power was with the players and the agents, because they could say, oh, well, you know, I've got Real Madrid on the phone, I've got Chelsea on the phone, I've got the Saudis offering me triple your money. It's hard for Hughes to get that over the line when their agents can just say that. And I know how agents work. That is what they would have been saying. Van Dijk had a very good offer on the table from Chelsea. Again, a lot of it was the fact that they love the club. Mo Salah loves the club. Virgil van Dijk loves the club. But that take nothing away from Richard Hughes. They were hard deals to do. I think the Trent one, again, don't want to make this video like, ooh, how good is Richard Hughes? But again, you can't really blame him for the Trent one too much, because it's quite clear that before Richard Hughes was even on Liverpool's radar, Trent Alexander-Arnold had pretty much made up his mind. He was going to Real Madrid, so I don't think that one I don't think you can lie too much blame at Richard Hughes' door for that. And as well, he could have left for free. He'd already played his last Liverpool game and they still managed to get £10 million off the transfer fee. That's a quarter of Milos Kerkez. It's a third of Jeremy Frimpong. That's good business. £10 million, definitely not to be sniffed at. He's already shown this window he can get good fees for the fringe players, 35 million for Kwanzaa, with a buyback clause in it, which is very good business, I think. 18 million for Kelleher. Again, I think, what was it? Did he have a year left on his deal? That's good business, I think. What's next? I mean, you know, in terms of the incomes, there could be more. You know, we know about the Mark Gahey situation, which you mentioned in the last video. We know he wants a striker. But everyone seems to love Richard Hughes. I mean, going back to last summer, there were some nasty things said about him with the agents that I spoke to, but I think you can put a positive slant on him. Just the words were, he's stubborn, he's really hard to deal with, he's robotic. But you don't want some guy who's just going to be walking into the negotiating table basically saying, "Oh, are you, mate? Yeah, I'll give you whatever you want." That's probably what I would do, to be fair. That's why I would not be good at that job. I'm not good at negotiating. That's why I'm stood looking like I'm in a hostage video, doing a video about Richard Hughes instead of being Richard Hughes and probably making millions of pounds a year. But anyway, there we go. Obviously as well, I know this video is not very structured, it's just rambling, it's just things that come into my head. The Martin Zubimendi deal was tough. Richard Hughes was in San Sebastian, Zubimendi gave Richard Hughes and co his word, and he U-turned on it. Again, can you blame him too much? I remember at the time, I remember putting out a tweet saying, this is I can't remember the exact words, but it felt like a disaster. And I remember I was sat, because I did that Zubimendi story when I was away for a few days. I was sat in a bar. My girlfriend, I had to say, sorry love, I'm gonna have to do some work. I obviously don't actually call her love, but I had to say, yeah. And I remember being sat there, I got a text from a guy who looks after, or one of the agents around Liverpool, and he said, "Mate, what is going on?" And I was like, I don't know, it's not looking good. I can't see them winning the league without signing anyone this summer. They needed a number 6. I thought they needed defensive reinforcements, maybe another forward. They obviously got Chiesa, but I thought that was going to be a real big punch for Liverpool. It wasn't, but that's it really. Richard Hughes, great references, seems a nice chap as well. And we're approaching a year of this man in charge, and as I said at the start, he could potentially be writing himself into Liverpool folklore, because Wirtz, Frimpong, Kerkez, possibly more to come. Some youth signings, great money recouped in outgoings. We're talking up to 100 million from that, maybe even more if Elliot, Nunes and them lot sort of go. I think this has just been a brilliant first year for Richard Hughes. He's come under a lot of criticism and pressure, but I don't think any of that exists anymore. I think everyone realises that this guy knows what he's doing. Michael Edwards knew that this guy was a genius. So, as we always say, maybe we should just trust Michael Edwards, because Richard Hughes knows what he's doing and Liverpool is in safe hands with him at the helm. So that's another video. I'll be back again soon. I think it's Friday today, well, it's actually Thursday, but by the time I put this out, it'll be Friday. So have a good weekend wherever you are and whatever you're doing, and I'll be back next week.